He answered phones and filed reports in the tiny sheriff's office in Cedar Falls, Wyoming, a town so small that everyone knew everyone else's business. Elias Eli Brennan had been the department secretary for 16 years, typing incident reports about stolen chickens and noise complaints, while the sheriff and his deputies handled what passed for serious crime in their quiet corner of America. At 54, he was invisible furniture, the man who made coffee, answered calls, and kept the paperwork straight while real law enforcement happened around him. But when the FBI alert came through at 2:30 a.m. about Marcus the Wolf Rodriguez, one of America's most wanted fugitives, heading toward their sleepy town, Eli didn't just take notes like everyone expected, because the quiet secretary they'd ignored for 16 years had once been Deputy U.S. Marshal Elias Brennan, the man who'd hunted down killers across 4 states and never let one escape alive. Welcome to Secrets Never Told. Before we continue with this powerful story, tell us in the comments which city you're watching from, and if you believe stories about hidden heroes deserve to be heard, hit that subscribe button. The Cedar Falls Sheriff's Department occupied a converted Victorian house on Main Street, its white picket fence and flower boxes making it look more like a bed and breakfast than a law enforcement facility. Inside, the old house's charm had been preserved with hardwood floors and original crown molding, though modern dispatch equipment and filing cabinets had been added wherever they'd fit. Elias Brennan sat at his desk in what had once been the front parlor, methodically updating the incident log on his computer. At 54, he moved with the careful deliberation of a man whose body remembered harder times, though nothing in his appearance suggested anything more dramatic than a lifetime of desk work. His graying brown hair was thinning at the crown, and wire-rimmed glasses perched on a nose that had been broken at least twice, though the injuries had healed cleanly enough that most people never noticed. He wore the same type of clothes every day: pressed khakis, a button-down shirt in blue or white, and sensible shoes suitable for walking on the department's original hardwood floors. Nothing about him commanded attention or suggested hidden depths. He was simply Eli, the secretary who kept the department running smoothly while Sheriff Tom Hayes and his 3 deputies handled actual police work. "Morning, Eli," Deputy Rachel Martinez called as she entered, shaking rain from her jacket. At 28, she was the department's youngest officer and the only one who consistently treated Eli as more than office furniture. "Morning, Deputy," Eli replied, glancing up from his screen. "Coffee's fresh, and Sheriff Hayes left a message that he'll be late. Something about his truck not starting." Martinez poured herself coffee from the pot Eli maintained throughout the day. "What have we got for excitement today?" "More missing cats." Eli consulted his notes. "Mrs. Henderson thinks someone's been stealing her newspapers again, and the Kowalski kids were apparently racing ATVs behind the high school after hours." "Wild stuff," Martinez said with a grin. "Think I can handle it." The conversation was interrupted by Deputy Mike Chen bursting through the front door, his usually calm demeanor replaced by obvious excitement. At 35, Chen was the department's senior deputy, a former big city cop who'd moved to Cedar Falls for the quiet life, but sometimes missed the action of serious police work. "You guys see the news from Denver?" he asked, pulling out his phone. "That cop killer who's been running for 3 months? Marcus Rodriguez? They think he's heading this way." Eli's fingers paused over his keyboard, though the motion was so slight that neither deputy noticed. "The Wolf?" Martinez asked, suddenly more serious. "Here? Why would he come to Cedar Falls?" Chen scrolled through his phone. "FBI thinks he's got family in the area. Some cousin or something. Either way, they're putting out alerts to all law enforcement within a 100-mile radius of Denver." "What's the protocol for something like this?" Martinez asked. "We follow Sheriff Hayes' lead," Chen replied. "Though honestly, if a guy like Rodriguez shows up here, we're probably in over our heads. This isn't exactly the kind of thing our department trains for." Eli continued typing, his expression unchanged, but his posture had shifted almost imperceptibly. Where before he'd been relaxed, now he sat with the alert stillness of a man listening for sounds others couldn't hear. The morning progressed normally until Sheriff Hayes arrived at 9:30, his mood soured by truck troubles and the early rain. Tom Hayes was a good man in his late 50s who'd served Cedar Falls faithfully for 2 decades, but his experience ran more toward domestic disputes and traffic violations than manhunts for federal fugitives. "Chen, Martinez, my office," he called as he entered. "We need to talk about this Rodriguez situation." Eli watched them disappear into the sheriff's office, their voices becoming an indistinct murmur through the closed door. He'd served as the department's secretary for 16 years, long enough to know that when serious business was discussed, his role was to maintain normal operations and stay out of the way. But as he returned to his routine tasks, part of his mind was elsewhere, automatically cataloging the tactical situation. Cedar Falls had a population of 2,847 people spread across several square miles of rural Wyoming. The sheriff's department consisted of 4 sworn officers with limited tactical training and equipment better suited for routine patrol work than confronting armed fugitives. If Marcus Rodriguez was indeed heading toward their jurisdiction, the local department would be severely outmatched. Rodriguez wasn't just any criminal. He was a former Marine with combat experience who'd killed 2 police officers during his escape from federal custody. The man was trained, desperate, and had nothing left to lose. At 2:30 a.m., the call came in. Eli had been sleeping soundly in his small apartment above the hardware store when his cell phone rang. Years of conditioning made him instantly alert, though his voice remained steady and unremarkable when he answered. "Brennan, Eli, it's Tom. Sorry to wake you, but I need you to come in. FBI just called with an urgent alert about that Rodriguez character. They think he might be in our area right now. I'll be there in 10 minutes, Eli replied, already reaching for his clothes. "Bring coffee supplies," Hayes added. "This is going to be a long night." When Eli arrived at the department, he found controlled chaos. Sheriff Hayes was on the phone with FBI field agents, while deputies Chen and Martinez studied maps and made notes. The usually quiet building hummed with tension and activity. "Understand the risk," Hayes was saying into the phone, "but we're a small department. We need backup if this guy is really in our area." A pause. 2 hours? You can't get here sooner than that. Eli set up the coffee pot and began organizing the paperwork that had accumulated during the evening hours. As he worked, he listened to the fragments of conversation that painted a picture of the developing situation. Rodriguez had been spotted at a gas station in Millerville, 30 miles east of Cedar Falls. The timing suggested he could reach their town within the hour, assuming that was his destination. The FBI was mobilizing resources, but their nearest tactical team was in Cheyenne, at least 2 hours away under the best conditions. "What's our play here?" Chen asked Hayes after the sheriff hung up. Hayes looked older than his 58 years as he studied the map spread across his desk. "FBI wants us to maintain observation and report, but not engage unless absolutely necessary. They're worried about civilian casualties if we try to take him down without proper backup." "So we just watch?" Martinez asked. "If he shows up here, we just let him walk around until the feds arrive." "That's the plan," Hayes confirmed. "Rodriguez is trained and armed. We're not equipped for a shootout with someone like that." Eli continued his work, filing reports and updating logs as if the conversation weren't happening. But internally, he was running through tactical assessments that none of the sworn officers in the room would have recognized as beyond his expertise. At 3:15 a.m., Martinez's radio crackled with a transmission from the State Patrol. "All units, be advised, suspect vehicle matching Rodriguez's description spotted on Highway 34, westbound towards Cedar Falls." The room fell silent. Hayes stood up slowly, his face pale in the fluorescent lighting. "He's coming here," Chen said quietly. "Everybody stays calm," Hayes ordered, though his own voice carried strain. "We follow protocol, observe and report. No heroics." 20 minutes later, a dark sedan with Colorado plates drove slowly down Main Street, its headlights cutting through the pre-dawn darkness. From the department's front window, they watched it pass, noting the single occupant behind the wheel. "That's him," Hayes whispered, though they were safely inside the building. "Has to be." The sedan circled the block twice before parking across the street from Miller's Diner, which wouldn't open for another 3 hours. The driver sat motionless, apparently studying the town's quiet streets. "What's he doing?" Martinez asked. "Reconnaissance," Chen replied, "getting a feel for the layout." Hayes reached for his radio to contact the FBI, but as he did, the sedan's door opened. A figure emerged, tall, lean, moving with predatory awareness that was visible even in the dim streetlight. Marcus Rodriguez had arrived in Cedar Falls. "He's on foot," Hayes reported quietly into his radio. "Suspect is mobile in downtown area." Eli stood up from his desk, moving to the window for a better view. In the street below, Rodriguez was walking with purposeful strides, but not randomly. He was conducting a professional assessment of the area, checking sight lines and escape routes with the instincts of someone trained in urban combat. "Sheriff," Eli said quietly. "Not now, Eli. I'm trying to coordinate with the feds." "Sheriff," Eli repeated, his tone unchanged but somehow more compelling. Hayes turned toward him, irritation flashing across his face. "What?" "He's not running anymore," Eli observed. "Look at his movement pattern. He's not trying to hide or get through town quickly. He's settling in for something." Chen and Martinez joined them at the window, watching Rodriguez disappear around the corner toward the residential area. What do you think that means? Hayes asked, his annoyance replaced by genuine concern. It means he's here for a reason, Eli replied, and he plans to stay long enough to accomplish whatever that is. As if to confirm Eli's assessment, gunfire erupted from the direction Rodriguez had taken. 3 shots, rapid and precise, followed by screaming. Hayes grabbed his radio. All units, shots fired on Elm Street. Respond immediately. But as they prepared to leave the building, Eli placed a hand on the sheriff's arm. Tom, wait, Eli. People could be hurt. We have to respond. You have to respond smart, Eli said, his voice carrying an authority that made Hayes pause despite the urgency. Rodriguez isn't a random killer. If he's shooting, it's tactical. He's either eliminating a specific threat or creating a diversion. How could you possibly know that? Before Eli could answer, more gunfire echoed through the night, this time from the opposite direction. Then an explosion, something large and destructive that lit up the sky with orange flame. The gas station, Martinez said, staring at the glow on the horizon. Hayes stared at Eli with growing confusion. How did you know? Eli looked at each of them, Hayes, Chen, Martinez, weighing a decision he'd hoped never to make. Outside, their quiet town was under attack by a federal fugitive who'd already killed 2 law enforcement officers. The FBI was still over an hour away. The 4-person Cedar Falls Sheriff's Department was the only thing standing between Marcus Rodriguez and whatever he planned to do next. Because, Eli said quietly, I've hunted men like Marcus Rodriguez before. The room fell silent except for the distant sounds of chaos from outside. What are you talking about, Eli? Hayes asked. Eli walked to his desk, opened the bottom drawer, and withdrew a leather badge holder that none of them had ever seen before. He opened it, revealing credentials that made Martinez intake sharply. Deputy U.S. Marshal Elias Brennan. Chen read aloud, but you're a secretary. I was a marshal for 23 years, Eli said simply, specialized in fugitive recovery. I've tracked down over 200 federal fugitives across 4 states. Marcus Rodriguez is exactly the kind of man I used to hunt. Hayes stared at the badge, then at Eli's face, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time in 16 years. Why didn't you ever tell us? Because I was done with that life, Eli replied. I came here for peace, Tom. I wanted to file paperwork and answer phones and never have to hunt another dangerous man as long as I lived. Another explosion rocked the night, closer this time. Through the windows, they could see flames spreading from what looked like the auto repair shop. But Rodriguez isn't going to give me that choice, Eli continued. He's not just passing through, he's systematically destroying infrastructure, which means he plans to make a stand here. And when the FBI arrives, they're going to find a war zone with civilian casualties. Hayes looked at his 2 deputies, then back at Eli. What do we do? You do exactly what the FBI told you, Eli replied, moving toward the back of the building. Observe and report. Stay safe. Keep the civilians protected. What are you going to do? Eli paused at the doorway to the building's rear office, a room that had been converted into storage and which no one had reason to enter regularly. I'm going to do what I should have done the moment Rodriguez arrived in my town. He disappeared into the back room, leaving Hayes, Chen, and Martinez staring after him in confusion. A few minutes later, he emerged, and the transformation was startling. Gone was the unassuming secretary in his pressed khakis and button-down shirt. In his place stood someone they didn't recognize, a man in tactical gear that had been carefully maintained despite years of storage, carrying weapons that definitely weren't standard issue for rural sheriff's departments. Eli? Martinez said uncertainly. Stay here, he said, checking the load on a pistol that looked like it had seen serious use. Keep the civilians safe. Coordinate with the FBI when they arrive, and don't try to engage Rodriguez directly. He's killed trained federal agents. He won't hesitate to kill local deputies. You can't go out there alone, Hayes protested. Eli looked at him with eyes that had seen things the sheriff couldn't imagine. Tom, I've been alone with dangerous men in worse places than Cedar Falls. This is what I do. Did, Chen corrected. What you used to do, 16 years ago. Some skills don't fade, Eli replied, moving toward the building's rear exit. And some responsibilities don't end just because you file retirement papers. As he reached the door, Hayes called out one more question. Eli, in all those years, how many fugitives got away from you? Eli paused with his hand on the doorknob, looking back at the people who'd worked alongside him for 16 years without knowing who he really was. None, he said simply. Then he was gone, disappearing into the night that had become a battlefield. For several minutes, Hayes, Chen, and Martinez stood in the empty office, trying to process what they'd witnessed. The quiet secretary who'd made their coffee and filed their reports had just revealed himself as something entirely different. A federal law enforcement officer with 2 decades of experience hunting the most dangerous criminals in America. Did that really just happen? Martinez asked. Before anyone could answer, Hayes' radio crackled with another transmission from the State Patrol. Cedar Falls units, we're getting reports of multiple structure fires and possible civilian casualties. ETA on federal backup is still 45 minutes. Hayes looked at his 2 deputies, realizing that they were now responsible for coordinating the response to a crisis none of them had ever imagined facing. What do we do? Chen asked. Hayes thought about Eli's words, about staying safe and protecting civilians, but he also thought about the man who'd worked quietly beside them for 16 years, who just walked into danger to protect a town that barely knew his name. We do our jobs, Hayes said finally, and we trust that Eli knows his. Outside, the night exploded with renewed gunfire, but this time it sounded different, more controlled, more professional, the kind of gunfire that came from someone who knew exactly what they were doing. 43 minutes later, when the FBI tactical team finally arrived in Cedar Falls, they found Marcus Rodriguez in custody, secured with professional zip ties and conscious but showing signs of having been in a serious fight. He was sitting calmly beside the town's water tower, making no attempt to escape. Standing nearby, looking like he'd just finished a routine patrol, was Elias Brennan. He'd changed back into his civilian clothes and was filling out what appeared to be an incident report. You the local law enforcement? The FBI team leader asked Hayes, who'd arrived on scene with Chen and Martinez. Yes, sir, Sheriff Tom Hayes, but the arrest was made by... Hayes gestured toward Eli, then stopped, unsure how to explain. Deputy U.S. Marshal Brennan, Eli said, producing his credentials for the federal agents. I'm embedded in this jurisdiction under deep cover protocols. The FBI agent examined Eli's badge, then looked at Rodriguez, then back at Eli. Deep cover? In Cedar Falls, Wyoming? Witness protection detail. Eli replied smoothly. Can't discuss specifics, but Rodriguez stumbled into an ongoing federal operation. Lucky timing. It was a complete fabrication, but delivered with such professional confidence that the FBI agents accepted it without question. They'd heard stranger stories about martial operations, and the important thing was that a dangerous fugitive was in custody without civilian casualties. As the federal agents processed Rodriguez and began their investigation, Hayes approached Eli quietly. Deep cover operation? He asked. Seemed simpler than explaining the truth, Eli replied, watching as Rodriguez was loaded into a federal transport vehicle. What is the truth? Eli looked at the sheriff who'd employed him for 16 years, considering how much to reveal. The truth is that I retired from the Marshal's service because I was tired of violence. I came to Cedar Falls because I wanted to spend whatever years I had left in a place where the most serious crime was stolen newspapers. But you went after Rodriguez. I went after Rodriguez because he threatened my peace, Eli said simply. This is my town now, Tom. These are my people. I wasn't going to let him turn Cedar Falls into another crime scene. Hayes nodded slowly. So what happens now? You going back to federal service? I'm going back to my desk, Eli replied. Mrs. Henderson's newspapers won't file themselves, and somebody needs to type up the incident reports from tonight. As the federal convoy disappeared into the dawn, taking Rodriguez toward his date with federal justice, life in Cedar Falls began to return to normal. The fires were extinguished, the damage assessed, and the story gradually emerged of how their quiet town had been saved by their own secretary. But when the local newspaper tried to interview Eli about his role in capturing Rodriguez, they found him politely uncooperative. I just called the authorities, he told the reporter. Real credit goes to Sheriff Hayes and his deputies for coordinating the response. The story that appeared in the Cedar Falls Gazette made no mention of Eli's martial background or his role in the arrest. It simply noted that quick thinking by local law enforcement and cooperation with federal authorities had led to the successful apprehension of a dangerous fugitive, which was exactly how Eli preferred it. 6 months later, nothing had changed in the day-to-day operations of the Cedar Falls Sheriff's Department. Eli still arrived early to make coffee, still typed incident reports about missing pets and minor property disputes, still maintained the filing system, and answered phones with quiet professionalism. But Hayes, Chen, and Martinez saw him differently now. They understood that the man organizing their paperwork had skills and experience that dwarfed their own, that he'd chosen to serve their small community in a humble capacity, despite being qualified for much greater responsibilities. Eli, Martinez said one quiet afternoon as she reviewed reports at his desk. Can I ask you something? Of course. Do you ever miss it? The Marshal Service? Eli looked up from his computer, considering the question seriously. I miss the satisfaction of getting dangerous people off the streets. I miss working with other professionals who understood the stakes. I miss the feeling that my work directly protected innocent people. But I don't miss the violence. I don't miss the sleepless nights, or the constant tension, or the weight of making life and death decisions. And I don't miss just the loneliness of a job that required me to keep everyone at arm's length. Martinez nodded. So you're happy here? I'm content here, Eli replied, which is something I never thought I'd be able to say about anywhere. As she prepared to leave, Martinez paused at the door. Eli, if something like Rodriguez ever happens again, it won't, he said confidently. How can you be sure? Eli smiled slightly, the expression transforming his usually serious face. Word gets around in certain circles, Deputy. The story of what happened to Marcus Rodriguez in Cedar Falls has been told a few times. Professional criminals tend to avoid places where retired marshals might be keeping watch. That evening, as Eli locked up the department and prepared to return to his apartment, he reflected on the strange path that had brought him to this point. 23 years of hunting fugitives across the country, followed by 16 years of filing paperwork in a town most people couldn't find on a map. It wasn't the career he'd planned as a young man, but it had turned out to be exactly the life he needed. He'd found his place in Cedar Falls, among people who valued quiet competence over dramatic gestures, who respected service without requiring recognition. As he walked home through the peaceful streets of his adopted town, Elias Brennan, former U.S. Marshal, current department secretary, and permanent guardian of Cedar Falls' small-town tranquility, allowed himself to smile at the knowledge that some of the most important work in the world was done by people nobody noticed, in places nobody thought to look. The next morning, he'd be back at his desk, making coffee and filing reports, invisible once again to everyone except those who'd learned to see past appearances to the strength beneath. And that was exactly how he preferred it.